everybody. This is Jason Sherman. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I speak to Jeff Seder. He's a founder of Equine Biomechanics and Exercise Physiology. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And this episode is going to be completely unlike anything I've ever had before because we are going to be talking about revolutionizing racehorse selection. And for those of us out there who don't know much about the topic, we have heard of the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. I had to look up what the heck the Preakness was. And it turned out that it was, I guess, the name of a horse a long time ago. And then they ended up naming the race after that. But before we get into the history, I'm just curious how somebody even gets started in the horse racing industry. Because to me, that sounds like a generational thing. It doesn't, you don't just fall into it. So how did you get into it?
Well, how did I get into it? I wasn't born into it. I didn't know anything.
Okay,
Uh,
interesting.
I did, and I took a ride one day in May when I was 27 years old at a rental stable on a blind date, and I fell in love with the horse instead of the girl. And so I started taking lessons, and I really got into it. I just loved it, and I decided, and I wrote my thesis on for I was in I was in the joint program in law school and business school, so they didn't even have one because I got into both, did them both at the same time. And they told me, well, you'll probably get a divorce or a nervous breakdown, but you can do it if you want. I wasn't married. Anyway, I was in the middle of, so I decided I would do my project on the horses. I got to the senior year late, like March, and my thesis advisor had to be something in economics, business, and in law. And my senior advisor was Archibald Cox, fresh from the Nixon Midnight Massacre,
Huh.
and all that stuff. His office was in the stacks and deep in the
Interesting.
library, which is just piles of books and shelves and everything, and a desk in a corner. And I sat there. I had to have a meeting about my thesis, and he said, "Well, how's it going?" And I, kind of looked down, so he figured it was not good. And he said, "Well, what are you interested in?" I thought he was going to throw me out. And he said, "What are you interested in?" I said, looked down again and said horses, and I thought that'll be it, because by then I was full-fledged, obsessed, taking lessons.
Man, it sounds like you just threw a dart at the wall and whatever it landed on is what you picked. You know, I happened to go to a university that was an equine university, Delaware Valley University. It was really big on horses. So I saw all the equine majors there and all the things that they dealt with. But more recently, I was really, I don't know what made me want to look up horse racing. And I guess maybe the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, something was going on, Triple Crown, whatever. And I was curious, why are thoroughbreds so sought after, such a big kind of business? Because they can go for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for the breeding purposes and whatnot. And it turned out that the thoroughbred horses all come from, I think it's three horses. One is Arabian, one is English, and one is something else. And all the horses came from these three horses. And if they
The
don't,
Darley Arabian, the Godolphin Stud, and
yeah. And so tell me a little bit about how hundreds of years later or whatnot, these thoroughbreds are supposedly still coming from that lineage, and it's being tracked by, I guess, books or computers at this point. How does everyone know that they really are coming from those horses? Because that's the part that I can't get.
well, there's a registry. But let me just finish my story about the thesis. So I told him horses. So he turned around. This is Archibald Cox and Stacks at Harvard, and he gets this huge book. He says, "This is the statute that governs horse racing in Pennsylvania, in Massachusetts, rather." Than he drops it on the desk, and the dust goes up, and then he says, "Nobody's looked at that." So I did it. I went to town. I went to the Capitol. I was in the archives. I was in the racetrack financials, and I really went crazy with it. And it just launched me. And I thought I really wanted to do something outside with horses. And I thought maybe I looked around. I thought the only way I could earn a really decent living, was in horse racing. So I had to do something about it. So I became an entrepreneur, as they say. And
because I know the equine students were always shoveling manure. That was part of their deal at the school.
yeah. Well, anyway, so I had a horse, and I had a job in basically on Wall Street, and I quit, and I rented a farm, and I took my horse out there, and I said, put him in the stall. I said, "We're living together," and
That's funny.
And then away I went. The thoroughbreds, yeah, there's 300 and something years of
Yeah.
breeding and knowledge and expertise.
Right.
And but it hasn't really changed much till I hit it about 40 years ago.
Hmm.
And just as a, and when I did, I was, I didn't have the money or the contacts or anything else, but I did have, I was pre-med at Harvard, and I had a good law and business degrees, advanced degrees. And I decided none of that was being used in horse racing.
Right.
It
Right.
was all eyeball and intuition and 300 years of tradition. And yeah, they had learned a lot, but there was a lot they didn't know. And yes, the thoroughbred was a incredible, well, in many ways, the very best athlete in the horse world, and very incredibly bred for a
Yeah,
remarkable
they're
athlete.
supposedly bigger and stronger, and they have more stamina. And I was just looking this up, and I'm like, I mean, just breeding them is a multi-million-dollar business alone.
And that's where most of the money is. It's not in the racing.
Right. It's the breeding,
You want
right?
to get
So
it. You want to sell to the guys you want to breed and sell to the guys who want to pay huge money for horses, but as a breeder. But the way you make the most money is to create breeding value in your stock and the brood mares and the stallions and that kind of thing.
I mean, and you
It can
said
be
40.
very many multi-million dollars, and
You said you were doing this for 40 years, so I'm assuming you were like a scout, like I guess, like
I
uh,
started out. I mean, when I started with the Olympic sports medicine team. I was one of the young lawyer, one of the very original start of the sports medicine and science and the Olympics and stuff. And I learned a lot that the elite athletes were as different from normal as is from sick or injured. And so we had to gather all the data on it. And so I decided I would do that with racehorses. And if I had known how long it would take and how much it would cost, I would have done it.
oh
But
man,
it turns out I had to invent the equipment to get the data on the elite horses. Nobody knew what it was.
right,
Oh, and the guys who were supposed to be experts, like I invented the first heart rate meter that a jockey could wear that was accurate on a horse. And the leading equine cardiologist told me the heart rates would be about 120 beats, and they were more than double that when they were roaring up the stretch. And the resting rate would be 25, and it could
whoa,
bounce to 120 when you went in the stall and you didn't see them move a hair. So
right,
their hearts were not only bigger, stronger, faster, but they could go up and down the scale just like that,
that's
more like
insane.
human hearts. And I learned all kinds of other things that had to be different about the training and about their athleticism. And most of what was known, I threw it out the window. I invented the new equipment. I got patents. I worked with MIT and Harvard and the Olympic Committee, and I piled up databases. And for 20 years, I spent millions of dollars. I had day jobs and did entrepreneurial leverage buyouts, and I was thoroughly ignored until I finally got a break. And since then, I've had multiple world champions. We've won the Kentucky Derby. The chances of getting into Kentucky Derby are like one in bazillion,
Bazillion,
and
yeah.
most people
The
get there
fact that
once
you
in a
won, I mean,
lifetime. We've had as many as 5 horses that we picked as unraced young horses in out of 20 in a gate in 1 year, and we've had them like many times. We've been second 3 times, won at once. We've had culminated in the first Triple Crown winner in 37 years.
so I recently
Yeah.
rewatched a movie that is very similar to the story you're talking about, Moneyball with Brad
Yeah,
Pitt,
we were before Moneyball.
and like
We
you were before, and I was just about to say, like, this sounds like you were doing it before
40
Moneyball,
years ago, I
but
was
for
banging
horses.
away at it. I was saying it's got it. The data doesn't exist. I'm going to get the data and do what it tells me.
So
So
now I'm assuming people are basically ripping you off here and doing the same
oh
stuff you're
yeah,
doing.
I published in referee journals, in the major referee journals, and that was really tough because I wasn't a vet and I wasn't an engineer, but I hired the best vets and the engineers and doctors and everything. So I had to give away a lot to get it legitimized. And I
Yeah.
am a lot of people are copying it, but most of them they don't have the data, they don't have the technicians with the experience.
All right.
So
So
I can give them the instruction manual and the violin, but they aren't playing symphonies. They're just
all right.
mostly half-assed cheap copies. So they fall in love with one technology, the size of the heart, the length of the stride. something, they fall in love with one thing, and it's not one thing.
Well,
It's the
that's what I want to ask
combination.
you because because of time restraints we have on this episode. I wanted to know, like, if someone doesn't know anything about racehorses, but they might want to get involved with the racehorse world, what are, like, say, the top three things someone should look for when looking into potentially either investing in a racehorse or buying one? Just off the top of your head, top three.
Well, the first thing is, what do you want? You just want to spend some money and have a good time, like owning a yacht,
Hmm.
or you really want to make it a business?
Got it.
If you want to just have some fun and have a lottery ticket, you can buy a great horse for $2 million unraced, or for 40,000. The horses that won the Kentucky Derby this year and the Oaks, the female version, were both $40,000 at auction. You don't spend a lot of money, and you can buy one for about, you're as good a chance as anybody if you have the right guy picking it, at about 40,000, not 2 million. And uh, the trainer is critical. So, or if you want it to be a business, then you got to buy a stable's worth. Then you're creating a professional team. But unlike the NBA or the NFL, you don't have to spend $2 billion. You spend about $20 million, and you can have a very serious team. And you're pretty
Wow.
well. If you're good at it, you'll make money.
Right.
If without it being a lottery ticket, because there's a logic to the whole business.
So, I mean, a lot of people who are wealthy are putting money into these things so that they could potentially win a Triple Crown, for example, and get all the prize money sponsorships, I'm guessing. And is that where
But
the
yet a
money
lot
is?
of them they spend huge amounts of money. They never have a really good horse.
Wow.
There's a 99% of the people lose all their money.
Oh my God.
The industry is still Damon Runyon. There's all these unbelievable. It's difficult because everybody claims they had the great horse and blah blah. And if you look into it, they had nothing to do with it, or very little to do with it, or they did it once 15 years ago, whereas we're trying to do it 3 or 4 times every year.
So, like,
There's just so that the first thing is decide: do you want a lottery ticket or do you want to make money? If
mhm.
you want to make money, you have to go bigger and have more horses. The second thing is you got to check out. There's so much bullshit in horse racing,
Mm.
unbelievable. But there's also free public sites where you can get on the data and verify. Don't believe anybody. It's an industry full of caveat emptor.
Mm.
You got to check out what they say. How do they know? What was their real record? And get references, because
Mm.
there's guys out there that are princes that are as honest, send you back a dime if you drop it, and there's other
Yeah.
guys out there that'll fleece you for everything they can possibly imagine to get out of you, and they're very effective at it.
Wow.
They're they're
And people with a lot of money are used to
they're
just
smooth, they're
trusting.
likable, they talk a great game. Maybe they
Yeah.
had a couple of big horses or two.
Yeah. So, I mean, leading into what your business is, before we go, I'd like to know what are kind of like the technologies that you used to kind of change the game?
Well, the proprietary things are, we use slow motion photography, digitize 500 pictures a second of the way that when they're running. And the good ones are different even when they're babies. We looked at their internal organs, their spleen and their heart. It turns out the thickness of the walls of
Mm.
the left ventricle of the heart and the size of it and the ejection fraction of pumping, it's different. And it's not just a little different, it's a lot different in the elite horses.
Wow.
There aren't any elite horses that aren't in the top 5% for those variables. There's also the way they're put together, and you can, but some of that's important and some of it isn't. The size,
Right.
just the size of something is idiotic and simple. The size of the horse for its age in days, right? Chronological age turns out to be really important, and it's a big
Yeah.
advantage. And those are a few of the things we did. We also did. Interval training was a big thing in the Olympics with human trainings, but that
Mhm.
turned out to be the opposite of what horses need for
Oh,
physiological reasons. But we
interesting.
did come up with ways to measure, to extrapolate from how fast they were, from short races to what when they were young to
Right.
whether they could be competitive a year later in the longer races like the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
So we not only came up with technologies to select the athletic talent, but we came out of ways to target races and to evaluate and help manage which races they go in on turf.
And all of this is your
It's all
company,
data-based. It's
all
none of
data
it's my
based, and
opinion.
right. It's all data based, which is just like entrepreneur and businesses. We use data to drive our decisions. And what's the company name, and how can people find out more information about it?
Well, it's a big long name, the Equine Biomechanics Exercise Physiology Inc., but we call it EQB like this.
EQB.
But our website is not .com, no .com. That's a Canadian bank. We're
Okay.
eqb.fyi.
Nice. Okay.
eqb.fyi.
EQB.FYI, guys, if you want to check out Equine Biomechanics and Exercise Physiology, all about Jeff's amazing, groundbreaking approach to selecting and managing young, unraced, thoroughbred racehorses. This was fascinating. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Hope you guys learned something, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.